We are, of course, in Matt Rule's second year at Nebraska, second season, second fall camp. Now, as we go through fall camp, we get interviews from players, from coaches, et cetera, detailing some of the work that these guys are putting in, what they're going through in the current moment to get an idea of where this team sits going into the season. Now, I thought it would be interesting to look back at a year ago and see if we can take some things away from what they're saying today that'll get us ready for the season. Trying to go through and see the issues that were going on and what things were being worked on in the offseason for the 2023 season and how those factored into the season, as well as what's the difference year over year from that year to this year and what the coaches are talking about, what's being worked on. Are we ahead of schedule based on where we're at last year? For all intents and purposes, we should be, but I don't think this is something that gets paid attention to. We talk about the players returning, we talk about the talent that we have, we talk about the development and coaching these players on the field and who's going to step up. But I don't think we look enough into the things that are said at the podium and trying to see the transparency in the coaching staff and how much of this we can take away. Are they, telling us what we want to hear, or are they actually telling us the issues that are going on behind the scenes? Well, I wanted to do a little bit of an exercise today where I went back a year from today and see where Nebraska was at a year ago and what they were talking about. What were the issues? What were they working on? And did those issues carry over to the season? So I got a few clips from 2023's press conference, and I'm going to kind of carry that over into today's press conferences and what's being talked about today from Satterfield, et cetera, and see how those two things translate to kind of give us an idea of what we might be able to expect this season. So let's go ahead and dive into it. First things first, if you're new here, my name is Justin Adams. I'm a content creator here at Nebraska Football at the Voice of College Football. If you like what I'm doing here, please drop a like, comment, let me know what you think. Likes and comments, they always help me out, man. So and subscribe if you're new here. Stay up to date, all the latest and greatest. And like I said, got some fun stuff coming up for y'all this season. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Okay, to start this off, we can go by a few things off the top of our heads as to what went wrong last year. And of course, there were a few things, right? Turnovers, of course, being the main one. We all know that. Procedural issues, on the offensive line, and stuff like that, or just self-inflicted wounds in general had been a calling card of this team, of course. And just the general idea of the way that the staff was talking about the team and those type of deals. I'm going to go into a little bit of short clips of each one of these things and then move that over into modern day. And you can get an idea of just how transparent Matt Rule was or wasn't being last year. So I'm going to go ahead and play this first clip. And this is talking about the procedural issues.
No, I thought it was overall. The offense had a lot of procedural issues. The Big Ten officials there, play clock, a lot of trouble. Getting in and out of the huddle. A lot of procedural things, which hopefully will be a good wake up call for us to be better.
All right, so right there, you kind of see what I was alluding to with the procedural issues, right? And so a year ago today, we were at a point in the fall camp where it was literally trouble getting up to the line and being able to get the snaps off, right? And you'll hear a little bit more about that in a little bit in terms of the turnover department. But procedural issues offensively that close to the season last year. And, it did get better as the season went along. We saw a big decrease in that year over year. But that's kind of the focus. That was kind of the focus last year. And let's move it forward a little bit and just kind of see a couple of the other things that reared their ugly head in the season that Matt Rule's pretty transparent about last season. All right. In this clip, here's him stressing the importance of turnovers and just kind of saying where we were at with the turnovers. I'm going to let this run through and then I'll get my thoughts on it.
Is like, the last time that we had a positive turnover margin was Mike Riley's second year, and we went 9-4. It's the last time. That's unheard of to be that many years of negative ball security. So we are protecting the ball better. We're not getting fumbles knocked out. Sometimes with the third team, we had some center quarterback exchanges in the gun. But the first team was really clean. I think we had one takeaway at the end on a pick. So the ball security and the fumbles and all that are better. But that there'll be a lot more to it as we move forward. Like we'll have a lot more situations to see where we are.
Okay. So in that clip, he said the turnovers are better, right? It doesn't seem like he's very confident in general in that. And since that was such a big focus that late in camp, it was probably somewhat of a issue that he had saw. Now, of course, we heard earlier that, it was really Ron Brown who, helped Matt Rule kind of coach these things harder throughout the season. And self-admittedly, he had said it was a situation that he'd never been in before, and they weren't coaching it hard enough, right? And so now we can start to kind of see that, right? Turnovers, he doesn't sound very confident. And at the end of it, he left that disclaimer like, well, there's a lot of situations that we'll need to work through as well. And talking about just the quarterback, you know, exchange out of the gun and those things were issues in camp last year. And of course, those progressed and transpired over the course of the season. So Matt Rule was indicating in ways that these things would be an issue. Now, there's a couple more things that I'm going to go through here that will also, come up in the season of last season that he was pretty transparent about. So let's just go ahead into the next clip. Okay, now here's a little clip in terms of how he was kind of feeling overall about the roster. And again, a couple of indications in the way he's talking about, but notice the emphasis on, him acknowledging that, they have talent on the roster, they have players on the roster, but they needed something. Like they had to have this. And let me let it run for you.
It takes a lot to be able to play as a freshman, and they have to make a decision. They're going to put the time in to really learn. So we have guys who can make plays. A lot of guys, we have enough guys to win with, but someone's going to have to step up from that young group to help us out.
So right there, where he was talking about, we have enough guys to win. And again, you can tell a little bit of a difference in just kind of how well the coaches knew the players as well, because this season, and when I get into today's press conferences, I'll tell you a little bit more about it, but they are speaking more specifically about certain players, right? And that is another thing year over year. Is last year it was still about learning the players and the players learning the staff, and now that they've kind of already done that, now they have the ability to really connect with these guys and work on the fine-tuned details. Now that there's a trust in there, and also the coaching of the players holding each other accountable. But it seemed last year that he deemed it would be necessary for us to be successful for these young guys and freshmen to have to step up. Now, this year, of course, Raiola is going to be a big part of that, but it doesn't feel like we have to have some freshmen step up for Nebraska to win this year, if that makes sense. Now, for Nebraska to be at its best, of course, we do want, those young freshmen guys being able to come up and play. But I think now more specifically, because again, he was talking about how they have to do things the right way, how hard it is to play as a freshman, and how much goes into that. Well, now I think that he has that system in place, and he's starting to really kind of see some of these freshmen go through it. Now he's kind of built that trust and knows these guys can step up, but they don't have to. And I feel like maybe some of those guys that might not have been on his radar of guys that wouldn't usually start in their freshman year had to step up and do that. And a lot of the young guys did step up. However, the circumstances that led to it was more so injuries, as opposed to him being able to implement the guys that he wanted to implement based on their play. And so it's another very important part of this, because again, he's talking about the roster as a whole and says we have guys that can help us win, but we have to have this. And again, this year, it doesn't feel like those guys have to step up for Nebraska to win. So I'll move it a little bit forward as well. Let's get into some kicking, our favorite discussion this offseason, the kicking game and special teams. Now, we heard Matt Rule be a little bit complimentary of some of the kickers that we currently have. Alvano, of course, still recovering from his injury. But a year ago, a lot of the stuff that I think came up during the season, the reason why this is important is because these were things that carried over from fall camp into the season that we are aware of, right? And that just goes to show right there that this was stuff that they knew was an issue. It necessarily wasn't on them And I'm going to say it wasn't on them in terms of just because the fact that it was year one and they're trying to implement these things, learn these players and stuff like that. But the problems that came up in the season were problems that he discussed here, and the kicking game being one of them. I know we were confident in Alvano coming into the season. However, you know, they were giving us some of the answers we needed to hear. And so let me go ahead and go right into the clip about the kicking issues.
You mentioned the kicking game, some issues.
Yeah, just missed some field goals today. A little bit of wind out there, and just didn't knock it through the way I'd like us to. So, I have to go back to the tape. Protection was good. We did some kickoffs, we did some punts. Those were all good. Just obviously we're going to be in the type of games where field goals are going to matter, and that was not at the level of percentage probably that we wanted to be at today.
How's the defense?
So right there, again, it's not at the level that they wanted to be at coming into the season. Points are important. Last year indicated that even more so. And, another thing about it too is now that there's a little bit of a kicker, competition, they have a few legs in there. I think that competition is really going to help, push the other guys around them to be able to kick these field goals. And now he has the ability to kind of, really kind of go by feel and who he thinks, as the season goes along, who he thinks is just doing the best in those moments. Not necessarily as the biggest leg, but who is getting their job done, who is doing their job consistently. And that's what it's going to come down to. And another thing that I kind of hear, and when he's talking about these things, is just his, it's like his lack of, I want to say, I see more so what they're talking about when in terms of they were talking about it's going to be more coaches in year one, and then it's going to go more onto the players in year two, because you kind of hear him in a little bit of a way, kind of making sure that he doesn't put the heat too much on these guys, right? He's like, it just wasn't where we expected to be, right? So he's a little bit sugarcoating it in a way, but still telling us that it is an issue. Okay. Now that I'm through those clips, and another thing that I did want to point out is he praised the defense throughout this. So, praised the defense over and over and over. Really didn't have a bad thing to say about him. He said a lot of guys playing very well, really deep on defense, and they want a rotation of about 17 to 25 guys. So that's what we can expect this year, a rotation of about 17 to 25 guys. Now, what were they talking about in today's press conference? Okay. So I'm going to run through just a few of the things that they were talking about in today's press conference, with Marcus Satterfield. And what is the focus in today's camp, right? Satterfield said they are focusing on the implementation of some schemes and moving guys around and getting them, looks at different places. Okay. So again, just year over year, we've gone from a team that struggled with procedural issues, turnovers, etc., to a team that's able to focus on implementation of their schemes, moving guys around and trying them out at different positions to see what packages we can run them in and who does well where. And maybe, some of these guys can be in an expanded role, as well as situational football is what they were talking about today. Now, situational football is what I wanted to focus on, because last year, we know there was a couple of instances where the staff dropped the ball. Wisconsin game is one of them, where they dropped the ball in terms of how they were managing the clock, whether it be at the end of the half or the end of the game, there were lapses. So one of the things that's very important there is this helps the coaches as well when they're working situational football. And he was talking about, not scrambling, let's say you have 6 seconds in the game, you got to get in and out of the huddle, 6 seconds left, you need 3 points. You can't come out of that huddle with no timeouts and have a penalty, or you got to be able to come out and be able to make a quick pass to get you in field goal range, right? You got to be able to execute highly efficiently in those situations, because that is the game, right? Of all situations to be able to perform in, those are the ones that you have to perform in. And now this team is getting an emphasis on that. They're able to focus on that because they're not really sitting here working on not having procedural penalties and focusing on the kicking game and how are we going to fix these turnovers, or just not even knowing how big of a mountain that turnover battle was going to be, as well as, he was talking about the defense wasn't forcing as many turnovers as he wanted. And that was something that happened last year. Defense is going to have to force more turnovers this season. Now, another thing was putting Raiola through scenarios. He's putting him in these, 6-second, and even 2-minute drills and running him through, and he's learning decision making and how to, be able to handle those moments and what's the best play to make, when to live to fight another down, when to just throw the ball away and maybe take a shot at the end zone as opposed to, when you got 6 seconds left and you need 3, forcing a ball and throwing an interception. Give yourself still a chance to win at the end of the game. And so it's those type of things, right? And also, when it comes to the quarterback position, last year they were struggling to even get the snaps going. Unforeseen thing that happened last year, of course, was Casey Thompson leaving on top of the Jake Peets not coming over as a quarterback coach. But they were working on still snap center to, quarterback transitions. And now we're able to put a quarterback in a position to where they are focusing on the details of a tough situation, right? Situational football. And that is something that now gets to be heavily emphasized. And another thing here is speaking about the O-line, talking about Micah Mazuka, who, I'm a big fan of, and Justin Evans, right? Justin Evans, for instance, he said he's invisible out there, which in the offensive line is a good thing. That means you're doing your job. You're not getting beat. You're not getting penalized. So Justin Evans is one of those guys. Michael Mazuka's another one of those guys that I'm really, really high on coming to the season, probably 2 of my favorite linemen on this team. And like I said before, now they're specifying certain players who are performing at a high level. They are specifying certain players that, they trust. And that wasn't something that was necessarily happening listening through press conferences last year. Because again, I just don't think they knew these players well enough. And I think this is the overarching theme of this is that this is a huge part of what we can take away coming into the season. I know we want to see it on the field, but what can we take away right now, right? And I think a lot of what this staff does is they're very transparent at the podium. They're going to tell you in a way exactly what's going on. Last year was a little bit of protecting the players. This year, they're going to be a little bit more vocal about it. The players are going to have a shorter leash. So I thought it would be interesting to go back and look at a year ago today and just see where we're at versus where we're at now. And hopefully that can inspire a little bit of confidence as well, just considering what we know out of fall camp is limited and up to what they can tell us. So just a lot to be excited about going into the season. That's another element of why, I'm high on this team. And this isn't one of those things where I drink the Kool-Aid year in and year out. I'm not one of those guys. I had been in the past, but there's a different feel about this team culturally and everything, even over last season, right? Last season, I still had a bit of hesitation, and rightfully so. It's year 1 under a new coach. We don't know what to expect, but the confidence that I have and the change in the tone of voice from the coaches and players alike in this season really, really should give us a really high vote of confidence in what we can expect from this team. And I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised with what we see coming out on the field against UTEP in comparison to last season. So that'll do it for me here. Again, if you like what I'm doing here, please consider dropping a like, leave your comments and let me know what you think of this type of video. And if you like me kind of doing these kind of, a little bit off the wall, different type of videos to give a little bit of an insight into, some of the things that we may not pay attention to. So, like I said, drop a like, leave a comment, let me know what you think. And that being said, I will see you in the next video. Peace.